I stood there, shivering, the paper-thin envelope clenched in my shaking hand as the door slammed shut behind me. The chilly autumn air sliced through my coat, its bite as sharp as the words I had just heard. "Not worth the trouble," my son had said, his voice cold and detached. My daughter-in-law's laughter echoed in the hallway, cruel and dismissive. Worthless. After all the years of sacrifice, all the love and care, this was how they saw me. A stranger. Wait. Before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The morning air bit through Janice Rowe's fleece robe as she stepped onto the front porch, her slippers barely gripping the icy concrete. A pale Idaho sun hadn't yet softened the frost clinging to the steps. She clutched a half-full trash bag, determined to beat the garbage truck by 5 minutes. The second her foot hit the top step, her world lurched. Her body slipped out from under her like a marionette with cut strings. The trash bag burst midair. Coffee grounds, egg cartons, and yesterday's Idaho Statesman scattered across her snow-glazed lawn. Pain shot through her hip as she slammed onto the concrete, a scream muffled by the cold. She blinked up at the sky, panting. For a moment, the only sound was the wind rattling a neighbor's wind chime. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the phone still tucked in her robe pocket. She hit the contact labeled Evan-Cell. It rang twice. "Yeah?" His voice answered, flat. "Evan." Janice winced, her breath fogging. "I fell. I think I hurt my hip. Can you come take me to urgent care?" A pause, then a deep, impatient sigh. "Are you serious right now? I wouldn't call if it wasn't." She started, teeth chattering. "You're not worth the trouble, Mom." His voice sharpened. "Call 911 or whatever. I've got enough going on." She heard a smirk in the background. Chelsea's voice, syrupy and cruel. "Maybe try not falling next time. Gravity's a bitch at your age." The line went dead. Janice stared at her phone, breath catching. A strange silence settled in her chest, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, heavier. She was still sprawled across the icy steps, feeling more discarded than the garbage strewn around her. A door slammed next door. "Janice?" Ruth Allen's voice cut through the winter air like a knife. Moments later, Ruth's sturdy frame appeared at the top of the porch in her puffy red parka, eyes wide with concern. She dropped to her knees with surprising grace for 71. "What the hell happened?" "I slipped," Janice muttered. "Hip, maybe fractured." Ruth's eyes darkened as she gently helped Janice into a seated position. "Did you call Evan?" Janice nodded. "And?" Janice's lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes brimmed but nothing fell. Ruth exhaled sharply. "That little bastard." With practiced efficiency, Ruth disappeared and returned with her car already warming in the driveway. She grabbed a blanket and wrapped Janice like a fragile parcel before helping her inch toward the vehicle. Inside the car, heat blasting, Janice sat stiffly, the pain blooming deeper now, like fire beneath her skin. "You need a CT scan at the very least," Ruth muttered as she turned the wheel. "He didn't even offer to drive you?" "What did he say?" Janice didn't answer. She looked out the window, watching the familiar streets of Boise blur past, snowy roofs, bare trees, the yellow brick church Evan had been baptized in. She gripped the notebook in her lap, the one she kept by the phone, and wrote the date, time, and what Evan had said. She didn't know why. It just felt necessary. They passed a billboard. Boise Legal Aid, fighting for what's right. Janice's jaw clenched. "Ruth," she whispered. "They think I'm not worth helping?" Ruth glanced at her. "I'm going to prove I'm worth everything in court." Ruth gave a slow, approving nod. Now that's the Janice I know. The car turned onto the urgent care entrance, tires crunching ice. Inside the building, the sliding doors opened like a stage curtain, bright lights, antiseptic air, the low hum of fluorescent bulbs. As Ruth helped Janice inside, a nurse rushed forward with a wheelchair. But Janice paused at the threshold. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice, though calm, carried the steel edge of a woman who had just decided something permanent. "They're not just going to wish they helped me, Ruth," she said. "They're going to pay for not helping me." Ruth smiled grimly. "And I'll be right there with you when they do." The waiting room at Boise Legal Aid was nothing like the courthouse Janice remembered from jury duty decades ago. No gavel, no wood-paneled walls, just scuffed linoleum, low murmurs, and a half-dead ficus in the corner that looked as tired as the people seated beneath it. Janice sat near the window, her coat draped over her lap. The paper bag from urgent care crinkled beside her, holding the discharge papers, prescription slips, and the X-ray report confirming a deep bone bruise and hairline fracture. No surgery required, but rest, elevation, and heat. Still, the pain wasn't just in her hip. Her fingers tightened around the faded black notebook in her purse. She stared at the receptionist's desk, where a digital screen slowly ticked through case numbers like a DMV. Ruth, seated beside her, tapped her cane rhythmically against the chair leg, like a warning drumbeat. "Janice Rowe?" A calm male voice called from the hallway. She looked up to see a man in his early 40s, gray sweater under a navy sport coat, laptop under one arm, and a look that suggested he'd seen far worse than a fractured hip. "Mark Benson," he said, offering a hand. "Come on back." Janice rose slowly, clutching her purse, and Ruth followed without being asked. Mark raised an eyebrow at the second guest but said nothing, just opened the door to his small office and gestured them inside. The space was tight. No degrees on the wall, just a cheap coffee maker, an overflowing file cabinet, and a motivational poster about justice peeling at the corner. "Take your time," Mark said gently as he sat. "Start wherever it makes sense." Janice stared down at her hands, then at the notebook. Then, finally, she spoke. "It didn't all happen at once," she said. "It was small things, over years. Gas cards I never saw again. Checks written just to help them float rent. Credit cards in my name. I didn't even know they were open." Mark nodded slowly. No judgment. Just listening. "I let it slide at first," she continued. "It was family. You don't think, your own child." She stopped herself. But it never stopped. It just got smarter, sneakier. Mark leaned forward. "Did you document any of this?" Janice paused. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out the black notebook. It was soft with wear, the spine taped in places, its edges curled and stained. She opened it to a page marked August 2019, a copy of a check stub with "Loan for Evan" written in the memo line. Below it, an ATM withdrawal receipt. Beside that, a note in her looping cursive. "Chelsea said they'd pay back by October. Never did." She slid it across the desk. Mark opened the book like it was a holy text. His eyebrows arched. Flip, flip, flip. Gas receipts, screenshots, bank statements with transactions she'd circled in red ink. "This is gold," he muttered, half to himself. "You did all this on your own?" Janice nodded, not proudly, just factually. "I was a librarian for 40 years. Keeping records is what I do." Behind her, Ruth chuckled. She once cataloged her Thanksgiving leftovers in a spreadsheet. Mark smiled faintly, but it faded fast. "What you're describing isn't just negligence or bad behavior. It's exploitation. You trusted them, and they weaponized that trust." Janice's jaw clenched, her fingers curling slightly over the purse in her lap. "I thought if I didn't make noise it would stop," she said softly. "Instead, they treated my silence like permission." Mark stood and walked to a printer beside his desk. "Would you be willing to move forward with an official complaint?" he asked. "This can start civil, but depending on what we find, it might go deeper." Janice didn't hesitate. "Yes." He turned back to her, holding a packet of intake forms. "Then let's get to work. And Ms. Rowe." He looked her straight in the eye. "I believe you." Ruth let out a low breath, almost a laugh. "Let's see him call you worthless now." Janice took the forms and started signing, her handwriting steady. As Mark left briefly to scan the notebook, Janice looked toward the door. The same one she'd entered not 20 minutes ago, and then back at Ruth. "I'm not stopping," she whispered. "Not this time." The printer in the next room began spitting out copies. Janice's eyes narrowed, because from this moment forward, everything would be documented and used. The house was too quiet for a Tuesday morning. Janice stood at the edge of Evan and Chelsea's front walkway, her gloved hand wrapped around an envelope, unsealed, torn slightly at the corner, with a faint scent of her own lavender-scented stationery still clinging to it. She hadn't called. She didn't text. She didn't need to. They'd stolen her bank statement, and they didn't think she'd notice. She knocked once, brisk and direct. The kind of knock that said, "I already know what you did." Chelsea opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her oversized cardigan drooped off one shoulder, and a coffee mug dangled in her hand, its front stamped with the words, "Number Blessed." "Well, This is unexpected, Chelsea said, feigning a stretch. Everything okay, Janice? Janice held up the ripped envelope. My monthly statement from First Union never arrived, she said calmly, but I found this, stuffed behind your recycling bin. The corner's damp. Chelsea barely looked at it. We don't touch your mail. It wasn't opened when I left the mailbox. Now it is. Chelsea rolled her eyes. You probably dropped it. Or forgot you opened it. Happens at your age. Janice didn't flinch. I have a photo of the sealed envelope from the day it was delivered. Time-stamped. From deeper inside the house, Evan called out. She's confused again, Chels. Let it go. Janice stepped forward, voice low and measured. Don't speak about me like I'm not here. Evan appeared behind Chelsea, shirtless and barefoot, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well in months. You're acting paranoid, Mom, he said. Seriously, if you're gonna start playing detective, maybe talk to a real one. Janice gave the briefest hint of a smile. Already did. She turned without another word and walked back to her car, the envelope tucked under her arm like evidence from a crime scene. Back in her kitchen, Ruth sat at the table with 2 mugs of cocoa and a yellow legal pad spread wide. Well? She asked. Janice placed the torn envelope next to a fresh stack of unopened backups, the duplicate bank statements she'd been having delivered to Ruth's address for months now. Just in case. I didn't accuse, Janice said, sitting with effort. Didn't threaten. Just showed the truth. Ruth tapped a nail against the envelope. Think they got the message? Janice stared out the window. They got something. The following morning, Mark sat across from them again, flipping through the scanned documents Janice had forwarded overnight. His expression was unreadable. You're walking a tightrope, he said finally, but you're doing it well. Do we confront again? Ruth asked. Mark shook his head. Not yet. If they think you're unaware of the scope, they'll get cocky. That's when they make real mistakes. He tapped a finger on a line in the bank statement. This transaction, a TM withdrawal, flagged as in person. You weren't there. No, Janice said. But Evan was visiting that weekend. Mark looked up. We're not just dealing with mail theft. This is creeping into wire fraud. Later that week, Officer Tasha Green arrived in a navy parka and a soft, calm voice that didn't match the steel in her eyes. Janice sat with her on the porch as she recounted the missing statement, the forged signature from months earlier, and the unfamiliar charges. Tasha took careful notes. When's the last time you received all your mail regularly? She asked. I'm not sure I ever did, Janice said quietly. I just stopped noticing. Tasha looked up. It's good you're noticing now. As she stood to leave, she paused. It's not just about catching them, it's about taking your space back. That night, Janice stood under the flickering fluorescent lights of the post office lobby. She filled out the change of address form in blocky, deliberate pen strokes. The new P.O. box was hers, only hers, password protected, locked, in her name alone. As she closed the metal box with a soft click, something tightened in her chest. Not fear, not pain, but control. Back at the car, Ruth handed her the keys. You've always been the quiet kind, Ruth said, but you're starting to get loud in the right ways. Janice started the engine. No more quiet, she said. Not when silence protects the wrong people. The folder was thin, but Mark held it like it was radioactive. He placed it gently on the conference table in Legal Aid's back office and slid it across to Janice. This came in through a third-party debt database I pinged last week. Standard background check. But this, he tapped the folder. This isn't standard. Janice opened it with care. Inside, a single-page contract with bold block letters reading Speed Fast Cash Advance, dated 8 months ago. Loan amount, $2,000. Applicant, Janice M. Rowe, co-listed household member. Evan Rowe, her stomach twisted. I've never even heard of Speed Fast, she whispered, let alone signed anything. You didn't, Mark replied, voice clipped. But someone did. In your name. At the bottom of the page was a shaky scrawl meant to pass as her signature. It had the right loops, the right slant, but not the right soul. Janice's fingers hovered over it, trembling. That's not me. Then we've got our first concrete fraud, Mark said. Digital forensics can confirm it. But take a look at this. He flipped the document over and pointed to the emergency contact section. In block letters, Evan Rowe, household member, same resident. Janice sat back in her chair as if she'd been shoved. He hasn't lived with me since he was 20, she said. And even then, he never paid a dime. Mark exhaled slowly. People do stupid things when they're desperate. But this? This crossed the line from selfish into criminal. The next day, Officer Tasha Green stood in Janice's kitchen, arms crossed, uniform jacket still dusted with frost from the Boise morning. She reviewed the copy of the loan contract, eyes narrowing with each line. "I see this sometimes with elder clients," she said. "Family uses their info as a piggy bank. They count on you not catching it, or not fighting back." "Well, they guessed wrong on both," Ruth said flatly from across the room. Tasha nodded, flipping to the forged signature again. "You'll need to file a sworn affidavit of fraud. That'll kick off the federal report and start locking down your SSN from further use." Janice grabbed her pen without hesitation. They spent the afternoon at the kitchen table, the paperwork stretching across every inch of surface. Affidavit, ID theft report, FTC complaint, notarization forms. Ruth worked beside her, flipping through a shoebox filled with yellowed check stubs, highlighting ones that looked off. Her eyes moved fast, scanning like a nurse reviewing vitals under pressure. "Here's one," Ruth said. "This check to Evan's freelance tax guy. I remember when he said it was a loan for tax help. But look, this was cashed at a payday lender. And not one in town." Janice leaned closer. "Eagle Ridge. That's in Nampa. I've never even been there." They circled dates, highlighted totals, cross-referenced against Janice's social calendar. Doctor visits, book club, her sister's funeral, times she could prove she wasn't anywhere near the transactions. "Build the timeline," Mark had told them. "Every lie has a clock attached to it." Late that evening, Mark stopped by with a portable scanner in his laptop. He worked in silence, uploading each page while Janice and Ruth sat across from him, watching. When the last document uploaded, Mark finally looked up. "This isn't just neglect," he said. "It's theft, and sustained. Over years." Janice said nothing, but her eyes spoke. Not shock, not rage, just a clarity so sharp it could cut. Mark closed the laptop. "This is going to grow bigger than you realize. Once we file the affidavit, Speedfast is legally required to provide their digital logs, IP addresses, login history, application metadata." "And if the trail leads back to him?" Ruth asked. Mark's tone didn't change. "Then we prosecute." Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling the bare trees in Janice's front yard like they were whispering secret. She stood at the window, arms folded, watching the mailbox across the street, the one Evan used. Check when she was out of town. Not anymore. Not ever again. As Mark packed his things, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" Janice asked. Mark hesitated, then handed her the phone. An email from Speedfast's compliance office. Subject: Loan Dispute Notice. Urgent body. A second application was submitted under Janice Rowe's name yesterday, requesting $5,000. Janice stared at the date. Yesterday. She looked at Ruth. "They're still doing it." Janice sat in front of her aging desktop, the early morning light casting long shadows across the stacks of files now neatly labeled on her kitchen table. Her hips still ached in certain positions, but she no longer moved slowly, just deliberately. The screen blinked as she entered the final digit of her social security number. Request submitted. Your credit has been frozen with all three major bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. She exhaled, long and steady, like releasing a weight she'd carried far too long. From the hallway, Ruth's voice floated in. "How's it going in there?" Janice called back. "I just made myself invisible." 2 days later, Chelsea stood at the checkout counter of a downtown Boise boutique, her arms full of overpriced athleisure and a smug half-smile plastered on her lips. The clerk scanned the last item and said, "That'll be $382.74. Chelsea handed over a sleek platinum card like it was an afterthought. The moment it was declined, her smile faltered. "Try again," she said quickly. "Sometimes it glitches." The clerk tried again. Declined. Then again. Declined. Chelsea snatched the card and rifled through her wallet, pulling out another. "Try this one." Declined. Behind her, 2 younger women in yoga pants whispered. Chelsea flushed, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't quite form the excuse. "I'll come back later," she muttered, grabbing her purse with too much force and bolting for the door. At the same time, across town, Evan sat in his idling car outside a credit union, staring at his phone. The screen blinked. Your credit application has been denied due to frozen consumer report, flagged SSN activity, pending fraud investigation. He cursed under his breath, slamming the steering wheel. He tried again with another lender's site. Same result. The screen glitched briefly before showing a bold red banner across the top. Fraud lock engaged. He didn't even finish reading before he hurled the phone into the passenger seat. Back in Janice's kitchen, the kettle whistled. She poured hot water over a fresh chamomile tea bag and calmly opened her email. There it was. Complaint confirmation. Identity theft report filed successfully with FTC. Case ID 5193-A. She forwarded it to Mark and Officer Green, adding only one sentence. They tried to steal my name. I'm giving them a new one. Defendant. Officer Green arrived later that afternoon, wearing her badge prominently and carrying a thick manila folder. Thought you'd want to know, she said, setting it gently on the table. We're escalating the case to the district attorney's office. Ruth raised her eyebrows. That fast? Green nodded. Because they didn't just open one loan, they opened patterns. The DA's office is particularly aggressive about elder fraud right now. Your documentation, she glanced at Janice, might be the tightest evidence trail I've seen this year. Janice didn't smile, but her eyes lit with something close to satisfaction. They thought I'd be too old to follow the paper trail, she said quietly. Green shook her head. Turns out you paved it in cement. That evening, Janice and Ruth sat on the porch, blankets over their laps, watching the last of the sunlight hit the bare trees. They tried to bury you in debt, Ruth said, but you buried them in evidence. Janice stirred her tea. Every receipt they stole became a nail in their own coffin. Every charge they forged, a page in my case file. A car drove slowly past on the street. Too slowly. Janice recognized it instantly. Evan. He didn't look up, but she saw the tension in his jaw, the way he gripped the wheel like he wanted to crush it. I don't think he's sleeping, Ruth muttered. Good, Janice replied. He shouldn't. At 9:47 p.m., Mark called. Janice, he said without preamble. Speedfast just sent over the IP logs. The second loan request? It was made from a network assigned to Evans. Address time-stamped, traced, and attached to a browser session logged into Chelsea's Amazon account. Janice closed her eyes for a beat. And the DA? She asked. They want a full file ready by Monday. And they're not just looking at restitution anymore. They're preparing for felony charges. Janice walked to her kitchen window, opened it slightly, and let the cold night air sting her cheeks. Let them prepare, she said. I've been ready. The stack of mail arrived in a thick manila envelope from Mark, hand-delivered by courier with a sticky note clipped to the front. You'll want to sit down. Monsieur Janice opened it on the kitchen table, each page bearing a familiar but distant weight. Collection notices, final warnings, red-stamped demands from creditors she'd never heard of, all sent to her address, all under her name. Except the purchases weren't hers. Rent-to-own furniture in Meridian, a 6-month gym membership billed in her name from 2 years ago, and even an unpaid balance at a tire shop off Overland Road, all with dates that matched perfectly with Evan's visits, or the times he just needed to crash. She flipped to the last page. A court summons. Small claims, filed by a collections agency. Mark's voice came through the speakerphone as she scanned the header. We subpoenaed all mail forwarded to your address and dug through known debt registries. It's more than loans now. Evan listed you as his billing address of record with at least 6 creditors. That let him stall enforcement for years. Every delay bought him time. Janice's voice was quiet. He used my roof to hide from his own mess. Mark didn't deny it. And now the DA's office considers it active financial abuse. Ruth stood at the stove, wooden spoon clutched mid-stir in her hand. What's the next move? Officer Green answered that question 3 hours later with a knock at the door and a folder of her own. This just became felony territory, she said, spreading documents across the table. Pattern of identity misuse, mail fraud, and now evasion of debt through deceptive address listing. It's all in the statute. He made you his decoy. Janice shook her head slowly, as if clearing fog. He used me to disappear. Green's tone was dry. But now he's visible. Very. It was almost dusk when the knock came, loud, fast, and furious. Janice didn't have to look through the peephole. She knew the rhythm. She opened the door slowly, keeping the storm door latched. Evan stood on the porch, winded, red-eyed, and shaking. Not from cold, from rage. What the hell are you doing? He barked. You're ruining me. Janice kept her voice steady. You ruined yourself. I just pulled back the curtain. He slammed his fist against the doorframe. They're freezing my accounts. Chelsea's crying every night. My job's asking questions I can't answer. That's not my problem anymore, she said, almost softly. You went to the cops? His voice cracked. You think they care about some old lady with a grudge? Janice didn't flinch. She lifted her phone, camera already rolling, quiet, steady, focused. Evan froze. Don't record me, he hissed. Don't scream at me, she replied. Behind her, Ruth stepped into the hallway. You need to leave. Now. Don't tell me what to do, Ruth. Evan spat. You're not family. No, Ruth said coldly. I'm what family is supposed to be. She stepped outside and pulled her phone from her pocket. I'm calling the police. Evan's face twisted, panic flickering behind his fury. You think you're better than me? He snapped at Janice. After everything I've done for you? Her eyes narrowed. Yes. The storm door clicked shut. Inside, Janice exhaled and stopped the recording. Ruth was already on the line with dispatch, voice sharp and clipped. Adult son, known threat. Already under investigation for elder financial abuse, trespassing, yelling, aggressive posture. Outside, Evan paced, then finally stumbled off the porch toward his truck, tires screeching as he tore away from the curb. Officer Green arrived less than 10 minutes later, lights off but badge out. He's been warned now, she said. He violates the boundary again. We escalate to a restraining order. Let me guess. He said you're ruining him? Janice nodded. Green gave a mirthless smile. They always say that. Right after they realize you were the one keeping them from falling apart. Janice's hands shook only slightly as she poured herself tea. Not from fear, from adrenaline. I don't think he's scared of me yet, she said, voice low. But he should be. The sound arrived before the sight. A low, mechanical growl echoed down the cul-de-sac like thunder on asphalt. Janice stood at her front window, the morning coffee still warm in her hand, and watched the tow truck back slowly into Evan and Chelsea's driveway. Bright yellow, loud, unapologetic. It paused only long enough for the driver to check his clipboard before lowering the hydraulic lift. Across the street, curtains twitched. One neighbor stepped out barefoot, robe flapping in the wind, iPhone already recording. The truck in question, a black 2022 Chevy Tahoe with custom rims and tinted windows, was unmistakably Chelsea's pride. She'd bragged for months about the sweet rate Evan negotiated. Janice now knew what that rate had been secured with. Her name. Within moments, the truck's front wheels were off the ground. Chelsea burst out of the house in a blur of slippers and rage. Wait, wait! What the hell are you doing? She shrieked, running barefoot into the snow. You can't take that! We've got stuff in there. That's my car. The driver barely glanced at her. Ma'am, this vehicle is being repossessed by order of Speedfast. Financial due to non-payment. I have documentation. You don't understand. This is a mistake. We're making payments. Evan said it was handled. Behind her, another door slammed. Evan stormed out in a hoodie and sweats, his phone already pressed to his ear. I need to speak to someone at Speedfast right now, he barked. You don't get to humiliate people like this. But someone else already was. 3 neighbors filmed openly from their porches. One of them, Lee, the high school science teacher, angled her camera just right to capture Chelsea sobbing, barefoot in slush, as the Tahoe was pulled away in front of half the block. That night, Janice sat with Ruth and Mark at her dining table, sipping cocoa and scrolling through her phone. Here, she said, passing it across. It's already made it to the boys' neighbors unfiltered group. Caption says, Karma's got a tow hitch. Mark took the phone, watching Chelsea's meltdown on loop. Would you look at that? He said quietly. Public humiliation. We can use this. Janice raised an eyebrow. In court? He nodded. Establishes motive for emotional distress damages. Also helps prove financial instability. Makes it harder for Evan to deny intent. It's not just about what they did. It's about the story we can tell the judge. Ruth leaned back with a smirk. And this one's going viral. Janice chuckled softly, the sound carrying more steel than amusement. The next afternoon, Evan banged on her door again. But this time, it wasn't rage. It was desperation. You're destroying us, he shouted through the glass. Janice opened the inner door but kept the storm door locked. Her face was calm, almost maternal. No, she said quietly. You did that? He looked exhausted. Greasy hair, bags under his eyes, shirt half tucked. He was unraveling, and he knew it. You think you're winning? You're just making a mess that everyone's going to see. Janice didn't respond. Ruth appeared behind her and stepped forward slowly. Mess? She asked. Honey, this isn't the mess. This is just the receipt. Evan's lip curled. You two think this is funny? No, Janice said, still even, still soft. We think it's fair. Evan's fists clenched. Then, without another word, he turned and stomped back to his house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the porch across the street. That evening, Janice printed a screenshot of the viral video. She tucked it neatly into a new file labeled Exhibit C, Public Exposure. Then she slipped the file into the growing evidence box, locked it, and slid it under her bed. A quiet final motion to end the day. But as she turned off the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed, her phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. You're playing a dangerous game, Mom. Hope it's worth it. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed 3 words back. It already is. Janice sat at the kitchen table in her worn plaid robe, flanked by 2 steaming mugs and a calculator older than Evan's marriage. The morning sun cut across the stacks of documents like a spotlight. Check stubs, bank statements, forged loan agreements, returned payments, bounced overdrafts. Every page bore a number, and every number had a story. Ruth leaned over, scribbling totals in the margins of a yellow legal pad. That's another $90 overdraft from when they linked your account to his car insurance. 5 times, same month. Plus $2,000 for the payday loan, Janice added, punching keys with deliberate clicks. $417 in collection interest. 2 maxed-out credit cards they never used themselves, but let rot under my name. 1 bounced IRS return because of false filing. That alone cost me a refund and a fee. She flipped to the next page. $318.12 for a medical emergency, Evan claimed. Cash withdrawn the same day he bought concert tickets. Ruth shook her head slowly. This is a damn museum of betrayal. Janice tapped a final key. $13,284.67. That was the number. Cold, clean, unforgiving. When Mark arrived that afternoon, Janice passed him the stapled summary. He didn't speak for a long time, just ran his fingers down the columns. Holy hell, he muttered. You could have missed half this and still had a case. I didn't, Janice replied. I kept everything. Mark added a second sheet beside it. His own notes. Emotional damages, reputation impact, cost of credit recovery, legal fees, missed opportunities, stress-related medical expenses. He looked up. All of it admissible. We'll make the argument for full restitution and then some. Janice nodded. And the video? Mark smiled. Printed, backed up, and time-stamped. And now admissible, thanks to his own public meltdown. That evening, Officer Green stopped by with a fresh manila folder under her arm. The DA's office got our submission, she said, placing the folder on the table. They've reviewed everything, your ledger, Mark's addition, the supporting videos. They're pushing for a protective order ahead of the criminal filings. Janice opened the folder and scanned the draft document, her name in bold. Evans below it, then Chelsea's. All 3 of you deserve distance, Green said. Physical, financial, emotional. Ruth peered over her shoulder. Are we talking ankle monitors? Maybe, Green replied, but we'll start with court-enforced no contact. If they violate it, it goes to felony obstruction. Janice's hand hovered over the signature line. Then, with a crisp stroke of her pen, she signed. The call came at 9:17 p.m. Unknown number. Blocked caller ID. Janice stared at it for a moment, then answered. Janice. Chelsea's voice was low, syrupy sweet, and trembling. Hey, look, I know things have gotten out of hand, but maybe it's time we stop this. It's not healthy, for any of us. Janice didn't speak. She reached forward and tapped record on her landline. We're family, Chelsea went on, and if we just sat down, talked, woman to woman, we could fix this. All of it. Without dragging anyone else through the mud. A soft clink echoed through the receiver. Ice in a glass. You don't want Evan to lose his job. Or me to be investigated, do you? Still, Janice said nothing. I mean, you've made your point, Chelsea continued, voice hardening slightly. No one wants this to turn ugly. Janice finally replied. It already is. Click. She ended the call. Saved the recording. Ruth stepped out from the hallway, arms crossed. That was not an apology. No, Janice said. That was leverage. She lifted the phone and played back the message. Chelsea's voice crackled through the speaker, every word like gasoline waiting for a match. Ruth's expression turned to stone. Her voice will hang her. The next morning, Mark texted. Judge signed the order. Protective status? Active. Immediate. Janice placed the paperwork in a new file marked court-approved safeguards and filed it neatly in the locked metal drawer beside her bed. She stood for a moment, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock. Then she walked to the front door, opened it slowly, and froze. Her mailbox hung ajar, bent. The metal door crooked and half pried open. Inside sat a single photograph, burned at the edges, the image barely visible except for one thing: her and Evan, standing at his high school graduation. His face was scratched out. The courtroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and nerves. Janice sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy blue blazer, collar crisp, her expression neutral. Not stone, not ice, something in between, measured. She clutched the same black notebook that had started it all, now well-worn and tabbed with color-coded flags. Beside her, Mark adjusted his tie and tapped a pen against his legal pad. His briefcase was already open, lined with printed screenshots, account statements, and exhibit tags. Across the aisle, Evan fidgeted in a blazer he hadn't ironed. Chelsea sat beside him in a pencil skirt and too much concealer, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The courtroom fluorescents weren't kind. They exposed everything. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes but sharp posture. She looked over her glasses as she took her seat. Case 22-8093, the bailiff called. Roe versus Roe and Roe. The silence in the room was not empty. It was waiting. Mark stood first. Your Honor, what we intend to demonstrate today is not just misuse of credit, but long-term, deliberate financial abuse under the guise of family dependency. He held up the black notebook. This is the plaintiff's personal ledger. It contains dates, amounts, transactions. Some matched directly with forged loan applications and falsified debt listings. He handed it to the clerk, who delivered it to the judge. Across the aisle, Chelsea whispered something into Evan's ear. He nodded too quickly. Mark turned. Let's talk about Speedfast. A $2,000 loan filed under Ms. Rowe's name 8 months ago, followed by a $5,000 application 2 weeks ago, from a device located at the defendant's residence, tied to an Amazon login belonging to Mrs. Chelsea Rowe. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have the IP records? Mark didn't blink. We do. Exhibit B gasps rippled through the back benches. Janice kept her eyes forward. Then it was her turn. Mark gently tapped her hand. She rose, walked slowly to the witness stand, and was sworn in. She sat with her hands folded. I didn't want this, she said softly but clearly. I wanted to believe they'd stop. She looked straight at Evan. He looked down. I loaned them money, gave them food, covered bills. I signed a birthday card with a check inside when I knew they'd never pay me back. Because that's what mothers do when they're still holding on. She paused. I kept a record, not because I thought I'd use it, but because I couldn't forget the sound of my son telling me I wasn't worth the trouble. The courtroom was still. Then, they stole from me. They used my name, my credit, my peace of mind. And when I started to fight back, they didn't apologize. They retaliated. The judge shifted slightly. Retaliated how? Janice hesitated, just long enough to let the silence thicken. I found a photo of Evan and me from his high school graduation, burned at the corners, his face scratched out, in my mailbox, with a bullet casing behind it. Gasps again. The judge's eyes widened. Do you have it? Yes, ma'am. Officer Green has it logged as evidence. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Evan. Is there anything you'd like to say in your defense? Evan stood too quickly. She was supposed to give me everything. The words hit like a slap across the room. I'm her only child. Everything she has, everything she saved, it was going to be mine anyway. I just sped it up. That notebook? That's not proof. It's punishment. She's trying to ruin me because she's bitter and alone. The room inhaled as one. Even Chelsea turned slightly toward him, like she hadn't heard him say it out loud before. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Rowe, that's enough. No, it's not, Evan shouted, voice cracking. She's manipulating everyone, playing the victim. She was supposed to give it all to me. Janice never blinked. The judge picked up her gavel but didn't strike it. Instead, she looked at the bailiff. Send the entire transcript of today's hearing to the district attorney's office. This is no longer a matter for civil court alone. I'm referring the defendants for criminal investigation, fraud, identity theft, mail tampering, and intimidation. Evan slumped into his chair. Chelsea's mouth hung open. Mark leaned toward Janice. You did it. No, she whispered. He did. 3 days after the hearing, a sealed envelope arrived on Janice's porch, hand-delivered by Officer Green. She didn't knock. She came in person. Janice met her at the door, robe belted tight, eyes alert. The district attorney just opened a formal investigation, Green said, handing her the envelope. Criminal charges. Multiple. Janice accepted it without ceremony, her fingers steady. I assume he knows? Green gave a tired smile. Oh, he knows. Across town, Evan Rowe sat in the HR office of Precision Tech Solutions, his button-down wrinkled, hair barely combed. The compliance officer cleared her throat. We've received a subpoena from the Ada County District Attorney's Office. It includes your bank records, company-issued laptop, and timestamps on remote logins during a period of active fraud claims. Evan's jaw clenched. That has nothing to do with my job. That's not for us to decide, she replied. Until this is resolved, you're on administrative leave. Effective immediately. His chair scraped the floor as he stood. Chelsea was waiting in the car outside, but when he opened the door and slumped into the passenger seat, she didn't say a word. She was already scrolling through her phone, where headlines from a local crime blog read, "Son accused in financial elder abuse case. Prosecutors say the evidence is extensive." Back at the bungalow, Janice sat in the living room with Mark and Ruth as Officer Green unrolled a binder across the table. I've compiled everything, Green said. Every police report, every photo, every voicemail, surveillance timestamps, phone records, text logs, all packaged for the DA. Janice leaned forward. Does it feel like enough? Green met her eyes. It feels like more than enough. Mark added a fresh sheet to the folder. We're expanding the civil suit now, too. Restitution for everything they took and what they tried to take. Emotional distress, credit destruction, harassment, defamation. Ruth poured tea with her usual deliberation. Add bullet in the mailbox to the list. We did, Mark said, with photos and chain of custody certification. Good, Ruth said, sliding a cup to Janice. He said you weren't worth helping. Now the law says he's not worth trusting. Later that night, a judicial order was filed and signed. Effective immediately, all known assets of Evan Rowe, frozen, pending outcome of criminal proceedings. The order hit like a bolt. One by one, banks locked his accounts. Lines of credit were suspended. His joint checking account with Chelsea flagged and disabled. The lease on their rental car revoked. Even their Amazon Prime login bounced back with a system warning. Payment method declined. By morning, Evan's world had stopped moving. Janice watched it unfold from the warmth of her couch, the news playing softly in the background. She didn't smile. Not exactly. But she did sit up straighter. Are you ready? Ruth asked, appearing in the doorway with a small file box labeled Roe vs. Roe, Final Discovery. As I'll ever be, Janice replied. The front door knocked once. Mark stepped in, coat still dusted with snow. One more thing, he said, holding up a letter. Janice took it and unfolded the content. A letter from the DA's office, officially notifying her of her victim status in a pending criminal case. It included access to support services, legal protection resources, and a notice that she may be called to testify again, this time for the state. She read it all the way through, twice, then folded it neatly and set it aside. Let them call, she said. I won't whisper a word differently. Across town, Evan sat in the dark, holding his phone in one hand and a bottle in the other. He hadn't said anything for hours. The couch beneath him creaked from the weight he no longer knew how to carry. Chelsea paced the room, eyes puffy, voice strained. They froze everything, she whispered. Even the rent payment bounced. We're on notice. This is serious. He didn't look up, just stared at the screen of his phone, the last text he'd ever sent to his mother. You're playing a dangerous game, Mom. Hope it's worth it. The call came at 8:11 a.m. sharp. Janice was mid-sip of her black coffee when the phone rang. She already knew who it was. Mark's voice came clear through the speaker. It's official. Precision Tech has terminated Evan's employment, effective immediately. Grounds: reputational harm and breach of ethical conduct following the DA subpoena. Janice didn't flinch. She just reached for her pen and jotted the date in her notebook. "Thank you," she said. No celebration, just acknowledgement. Across the table, Ruth raised an eyebrow. And so begins the real fall. By noon, Chelsea had taken to the internet like a wounded bird. Screenshots floated to Janice via neighborhood group chats and a private Facebook thread called Boise Sisters in Survival. Chelsea, under the username @RealChelseaR, was posting in every form she could find. "We're being targeted. My mother-in-law is making it up to ruin our lives. Does anyone have a room to rent for a couple with nowhere to go?" Photos accompanied some of the posts, grainy selfies with tear tracks, one with Evan looking hollow-eyed in the background, staring into nothing. Janice forwarded them all to Mark without comment. He replied, "Building the case for public manipulation and emotional coercion. Thank you." Later that week, Mark filed official liens against Evan and Chelsea's remaining assets. What little they hadn't drained was now frozen, unavailable, unreachable, unspendable. A titled Honda Civic, a small crypto wallet, the final payout from Evan's now terminated 401k, even the $2,000 tax refund Janice knew Chelsea had filed for, using Janice's old address. "Every penny they took or tried to take," Mark said, "will now belong to you." Janice didn't smile, but her eyes softened just a little. That Friday, Officer Green knocked once and stepped inside with the confidence of someone used to enforcing boundaries. "The court signed off on the full protective order," she said. "Physical distance, digital no contact, and explicit third-party restriction." She handed Janice the official stamped document. It felt like closure and a warning. "If he calls, messages, shows up, or sends someone else, you call me," Green said. "I won't hesitate," Janice replied. "Good," Green said. "Because he already has." Janice tensed. "What?" Green opened her folder and pulled out a screen print of a Reddit comment posted under a throwaway account. "I lost everything because of her. Maybe someone should take something from her too." Same writing cadence, same digital footprint, same spite. "We're monitoring," Green assured her. "But keep your doors locked." The next morning, Janice received confirmation from all 3 credit bureaus. Her credit had been fully restored. Accounts untangled. Fraud entries removed. Scores returned to their original position, higher even, thanks to the removal of delinquent accounts. She read the email twice, then again, slowly, carefully. A tear slid down her cheek, not from grief, but from sheer hard-earned relief. Ruth stepped into the room, holding a cake box from Westside Bakery. "What's this?" Janice asked, voice still tight. Ruth set it on the counter. "I figured it was time for a celebration." She popped the top. White frosting, blue piping, bold cursive in the center. "You're priceless." Janice covered her mouth. "Ruth, you don't owe anyone your silence," Ruth said gently. "You earned this. You took back your future." Janice looked out the window at the late winter sun beginning to pierce the cloud line. "Yes," she whispered, "and I'm not giving it away again." That night, while Janice washed the dishes and Ruth boxed up leftover cake, her phone lit up again. No number. No text, just an airdropped photo, declined by her phone's firewall. Ruth peered at the screen. "What was that?" Janice's expression didn't change. "Blocked it." "You sure?" Janice wiped her hands dry and reached for her phone. She opened her security app. Motion logs from the front porch. A blurred image at 3:27 a.m. A figure. Hood up, gloved hands, face turned from the camera, standing just past the mailbox, doing nothing, just standing. Watching. It was a cold, brilliant morning when Janice stepped back into the courthouse. The same beige walls, the same creaky bench outside courtroom 3. But everything felt different now. This time, she wasn't here to fight. She was here to win. Mark walked beside her, file box in hand, Ruth just behind them with a thermos of hot lemon tea tucked in her purse. Inside the courtroom, Evan sat rigidly next to a public defender, his once casual arrogance now replaced with something brittle and half-gutted. Chelsea sat behind him, alone. Her nails were chipped. She didn't look up. The bailiff called the case, the judge entered, and the gavel came down. After review of the presented evidence, including digital logs, sworn affidavits, police reports, and the documented financial impact. The judge's voice carried with gravity, but no sympathy. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Janice Rowe. Gasps fluttered through the courtroom. Evan's head dropped like a stone. Chelsea's hand flew to her mouth. The court hereby orders full restitution to the plaintiff in the amount of $124,600, including principal damages, compounded financial loss, and legal expenses incurred during the investigation and civil action. Mark didn't move, didn't blink, just nodded. Furthermore, the judge can. Ongoing wage garnishment of Mr. Evan Rowe is to be enforced at the maximum allowable rate under Idaho law, effective immediately, until the debt is fully repaid, or his death, whichever comes first. Janice sat still, but her chest rose with a deep, invisible breath. The judge turned toward the defense table. As for Mrs. Chelsea Rowe, based on evidence submitted to this court, including voice recordings, loan documentation, and verified login activity, this court finds her legally complicit in the fraudulent activity and names her jointly liable for the full judgment. Chelsea gasped. What? I didn't. He was the one. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing her. Janice didn't look at either of them. She kept her gaze steady, fixed on the seal behind the judge's bench. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright for Evan's slumped silhouette. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't stop the local reporters from waiting at the steps. One snapped a photo just as Chelsea pushed past them, muttering, "No comment," over and over. Ruth placed a hand gently on Janice's shoulder. "You stood taller than both of them combined." "I didn't stand alone," Janice replied, glancing at her. "Friend, I never did." 2 days later, the final ruling came through in writing. Mark delivered it in a manila folder labeled in clean print, ROWEV, Rowe, Final Disposition. Inside, court-sealed protection of all Janice's personal bank accounts for the next 20 years. No access, no sharing, no loopholes, no more vulnerability. She read the documents slowly, not because she needed to, but because she could. That weekend, Ruth threw a dinner party. The living room was dressed in candles and soft music. The kitchen table was covered in dishes, both homemade and store-bought. A small framed sign sat at the head of the table in front of Janice's plate. "Fall to rise." Ruth raised her glass. To the woman who didn't just stand up, she showed them what standing looks like. There were a few tears, some laughter, even a joke from Mark that got a rare, open smile from Janice. But as the night wound down and the guests trickled out, a silence settled in again. Not emptiness, peace. Or so it seemed. At 11:42 p.m., just as Janice reached for the light switch in her bedroom, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One image. No message. She opened it. It was a photo of her bungalow, taken from the woods behind her property line. Nighttime. Zoomed. Blurred around the edges. Her bedroom window. Lit. Visible. She was in the frame. The letter arrived certified. Black ink. Government seal. Legal finality. Janice opened it at the dining table, her hands calm, her expression unreadable. Case number BK-24198, United States Bankruptcy Court, in re Evan Michael Rowe. Chapter 13. Filing confirmed. Mark sat across from her, glasses low on his nose as he read over her shoulder. "It's official," he said. "He's financially ruined." Janice didn't blink. "Payment plan?" she asked. Mark nodded. 30% of his income for the next 20 years. Garnished. No vacation funds. No new credit. No reprieve. Every collector. Every interest line. Every debt he once blamed on someone else. It all sticks to him now. He paused. "Your restitution's protected. Secured at the top of the creditor list. You'll be paid first." She reached for her tea without a word. A breath. A sip. Then silence. Across town, Chelsea threw her second duffel into the trunk of a battered Corolla she didn't own, borrowed from her sister who hadn't returned her calls in months. The repo took her car 2 weeks ago. Her final paycheck, short by over $700 due to garnished wages, barely covered rent, and now rent was overdue. She yanked her hood over her eyes and slammed the trunk shut, ignoring the notification from the unemployment app blinking on her cracked screen. Claim denied. Identity under investigation. In Janice's mailbox, the first restitution check arrived on Friday. It wasn't a grand total, just $181.37, But it was the beginning. She held it in her hand for a long moment before sliding it gently into the drawer where her old statement files used to sit. Ruth watched her from the living room. That the one? Janice nodded. You gonna cash it? Eventually, Janice replied. Not yet. I want to look at it for a while. That afternoon, Mark stepped through the front door with a printed spreadsheet and a tired grin. Want to know the best part? Janice motioned for him to sit. Every collector that's ever hounded you, the payday loan, the phantom gym bill, even the fraudulent credit cards, they've now redirected to him. And they're not gentle. He handed her the page. At the top, debt reassignment notice, active pursuit confirmed. Collectors will hound him for life, Mark said. He's radioactive in the financial system now. Janice leaned back, not triumphant, not cruel, just steady. He made me carry it for years, she murmured. He can carry what's his. Later that night, Officer Green stopped by to deliver a routine update, but lingered longer than usual. Everything's holding, she said, glancing at her tablet. Protective order intact. No new attempts. Surveillance clean. But, she looked up. We're keeping him flagged. Janice folded her hands. And Chelsea? She's off the radar. Not charged, yet. But the DA still has her under review for civil fraud. If she flinches wrong, they'll go after her too. Green looked around the living room. Clean, organized, peaceful. You turned their neglect into a sentence, she said quietly. That's rare. Janice nodded. It wasn't revenge. I know, Green replied. That's why it worked. Ruth appeared in the doorway, holding something wrapped in wax paper and string. I brought banana bread, she said. Seemed like a we're still standing kind of day. Green chuckled. Make sure to save a slice for court services. They're using your case as training material now. Are they? Janice asked. They are, Green said. You made it clear what elder justice actually looks like. Ruth set the loaf down and walked over. Then, without ceremony, she wrapped Janice in a long, quiet hug. You fell, she whispered. But he's the one who can't get up. Janice didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That night, long after the dishes were washed and Ruth had gone home, Janice walked to her front window. She opened it just an inch, enough for air. The trees were bare. The sky was clear. No one on the street. And yet, something in her skin tightened. Her security app pinged once. Motion detected. Back fence perimeter. She didn't check the video. Not yet. She simply whispered aloud to the still night. You can't take what I've already reclaimed. Then she closed the window and locked it twice. The ballroom wasn't enormous, but it was full. Rows of folding chairs lined with notepads, half-filled coffee cups, and the hum of polite chatter buzzed beneath a banner that read, Western Idaho, Elder Advocacy Summit, Power in Survival. Janice stood at the podium in a slate-gray blazer, the microphone adjusted low to meet her 5 feet 3 inches frame. She didn't use notes. I didn't come here to tell you I won, she began. I came to tell you what it costs to win. The room quieted. I lost time. I lost sleep. I lost parts of myself I didn't know I was still protecting, but I didn't lose my voice. And when I got it back, I used it. Behind her, the conference screens flickered to a photo. Just her hands, holding a restitution check. No names, no faces, just truth. I was told I was overreacting. I was told I was imagining things. I was told, by my own son, that I wasn't worth helping. She looked out into the audience. I'm here to tell you, that was a lie. We are not just worth helping, we're worth listening to. And when we speak, courts move, laws bend, justice listens. There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then. The room rose, a full standing ovation. Ruth, seated in the third row with a travel mug and tissues she hadn't needed, yet beamed. Mark stood at the back of the room, arms folded, watching her like a man who had just watched a client become something larger than a case. The next day, Boise Sun-Ledger ran the headline, Mother Crushes Son in Courtroom Showdown, Local Woman's Fraud Battle Sets Legal Precedent. Beneath it, a photo of Janice, mid-speech, strong posture, arms open. A far cry from the hunched figure who once whispered through tears in a kitchen full of unpaid bills. A week later, Mark stopped by with a bundle of printed forms. I'm putting your name in, he said. Idaho Senior Advocate of the Year. Janice looked up from her crossword. Me? Yes, you. Do you know how rare it is for someone to survive this kind of abuse, win a case, and still have the spine to share it publicly? You didn't just fight. You built a ladder for other people to climb out. Janice said nothing, but she didn't stop him. He left the forms on the table and kissed her on the forehead before leaving. A letter arrived that Friday. No return address, handwritten. The curve of the R gave it away. Chelsea. Janice held it in her hand for 1 minute, then two. Then, with a slow exhale, she stood, walked it outside to the curbside mailbox, and slid it back in. Return to sender scrawled neatly in blue ink across the front. Ruth saw it from the kitchen window and gave a small nod. Later, she placed a fresh cup of tea next to Janice's laptop. On the screen, Word document, title, Falling Up, My Story of Justice. The cursor blinked steadily beneath the dedication line. For every woman told she was being dramatic, for every mother told she owed more, for every voice nearly silenced. Ruth leaned in. It's really happening? Janice smiled. Chapter 1 is called The Fall He Ignored. Ruth grinned. About damn time. That night, Janice sat on the porch alone, wrapped in her cardigan, the manuscript folder resting on her lap like a finished quilt. A warm breeze drifted past, quiet, still, safe. A few doors down, someone's wind chime clinked. She pulled her phone from her pocket and tapped into her voicemail archive. One message, saved from 6 months ago. Chelsea's syrupy voice, brittle and trembling. We're family. We can fix this. If we just talk, woman to woman. Janice played it once more. Then finally, she hit delete. The morning air was cool, crisp, and cut clean through the last sighs of winter. Janice sat on her porch, hands curled around a heavy ceramic mug. Chamomile steam drifted upward, curling beneath the brim of her knit hat. Her porch swing creaked gently as it swayed, wood groaning like an old friend. Ruth sat beside her, her own mug resting on a patchwork quilt draped across their knees. Neither of them spoke at first. They didn't need to. The trees across the street had begun to bud, and the first red leaves of spring peeked through, cautious but undeniable. A breeze swept down the block. Ruth glanced over. You sleep last night? Janice nodded. Deep, dreamless, the kind you don't earn until the end. The front door creaked open behind them. Janice's cell buzzed once and she reached into her cardigan pocket to answer. Mark's voice came clear and calm. It's done. Janice straightened. Not from tension, just habit. Felony convictions finalized this morning, he said. He's got probation for 7 years, financial restitution on permanent record, and a restriction on applying for credit anywhere in the country without mandatory fraud review. A pause. Chelsea's fraud file was officially declined. Insufficient defense. They flagged her for future watch, though. Janice exhaled. So the book is closed. Mark chuckled. Sealed and shelved. They hung up without ceremony. Ruth sipped her tea. So what now? Janice stood slowly, stretching. Now, I live in the after. That afternoon, Janice sat at her dining table, logged into her online bank portal. The screen blinked. Account holder, Janice A. Rowe. Protection, single owner. Auto monitoring enabled total balance, $37,812.19. Her name, only hers. Every cent, untouched, unthreatened, hers. She added a new label to the savings folder, Future, Secured. Then logged out. She left the house without her coat, letting the wind press against her sleeves as she walked toward the Boise River overlook. The trail had a light dusting of mud from last week's rain, but she moved deliberately, like someone no longer trying to rush or retreat. At the ridge, she stopped. Below her, the river rolled smooth and silver. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of water swallow the last whispers of memory. This place had once felt like escape. Now, it felt like arrival. Her phone vibrated again, this time a notification from her blog. New comment on Falling Up. Chapter 3. Paper cuts and court dates. I didn't know how to fight until I read this. You made me fight for my mother, too. Thank you. Reader. 1529. Janice read it 3 times. Her fingers hovered over the reply button, then stopped. No reply needed. She slipped the phone away and smiled. Not out of pride, not for show. Just a quiet curl at the corner of her mouth. The kind of smile no one could take from her. Behind her, footsteps approached. Ruth. You left without saying anything. I needed to see it, Janice said. This river. This sky. This moment. Ruth joined her at the rail. It's peaceful here. Janice nodded. Because it's mine. That evening, the porch light glowed warm as Janice slid a tray of lemon bars into the fridge. Ruth set out clean plates and laughed at something Janice didn't even hear. There were no knocks on the door. No new threats. Just soft music from the radio and the hum of a kitchen fully hers. Again. At 9:12 p.m., Janice returned to her desk. The manuscript file was still open. Chapter 20. The piece I stood on. She scrolled to the final page and added the last line. Not angry. Not bitter. Just honest. He said I wasn't worth helping when I fell, so I made sure he fell harder. Straight into financial destruction. She hit save, then closed the laptop. And for the first time in years, Janice Rowe didn't need to look over her shoulder. She just breathed.